Welcome to this lesson on comparative advantage. Learning targets are as follows. I can determine which country has an absolute advantage in the production of a product using inputs and outputs. I can determine which country has a comparative advantage in the production of a product for inputs and outputs and explain the significance of this for trade and production. I can determine the mutually beneficial terms of trade between countries, and I can show and explain the consumption possibilities with specialization in trade for a country when given a term of trade. This video will just be on the first learning target. I can determine which country has an absolute advantage in the production of a product using inputs and outputs. But overall, the big picture in this lesson answers the question, why do nations trade? There are gains to nations that specialize in trade rather than be self-sufficient, and we're saying that a country should specialize in goods that they have a comparative advantage in. But before we get to comparative advantage, let's take a look at something called absolute advantage. Be able to determine which country has an absolute advantage in the production of a product using both inputs and outputs. For this lesson, what we're doing is comparing two countries and their production possibilities. And we're simplifying it down. There's going to be two countries and two potential goods. A country has an absolute advantage in a product if they can make more of it. So when we're looking at output production, in two countries, whichever country can make more has an absolute advantage in that product. Now we can also look at inputs. Inputs would tell us how much time does it take for a country to make one of a product, or what does it cost a country to make one of a product. Well, when dealing with inputs, the lower number the better. The cheaper the better, the lower amount of time the better, assuming it's the same product, same quality and everything. So if you're given input numbers, whichever country has the lower number has the absolute advantage in that product. Let's take a look at an example. And we have a chart here, China and Japan, fish and cars. Again, simplifying down. Isolate two countries, two products, don't consider anything else. And let's say these numbers are outputs, what's made. So the way to read this chart, China can make 20 fish and 0 cars, or 40 cars and 0 fish. Moving to the right, their PPF, you can see China's PPF there. A point at 20 fish and 0 cars, a point at 40 cars and 0 fish. And since these are the only 2 points we know, we'll connect them with a straight line. If it was a bowed outward curve, that's fine too. Japan can make 10 fish and 0 cars, or 50 cars and 0 fish. Another way to think about this, the same resources that it takes Japan to make 10 fish could also get them 50 cars, one or the other. So asking the question, which country has the absolute advantage in cars? Well, Japan can make 50 cars, China can make 40 cars. Absolute advantage, whoever can make more. So Japan has the absolute advantage in car production. Who would have the absolute advantage in fish production? China can make 20 fish, Japan can make 10 fish. So China has the absolute advantage in fish production. In this example, China had the absolute advantage in one good, Japan in the other. Of course, a country could have the absolute advantage in both goods compared to another country. Now, if those numbers were inputs, say it took China 20 minutes to make one fish and 40 minutes to make one car. It took Japan 10 minutes to make one fish and Japan 50 minutes to make one car. Here, who would have the absolute advantage in fish? It'd be Japan. Who would have the absolute advantage in cars? It'd be China, just the opposite. So keep your eye out for that.